Well, now, senior Republican spokesman Morkoc joins me now from Detroit, Michigan, to discuss Trump's warning to shut down Venezuela's airspace over drug trafficking allegations. Good to have you this weekend. Now, how does the administration justify closing Venezuela's airspace without United Nations approval? And isn't this a breach of international law? Plus, does the U.S. have the right to close another country's airspace?
So the United States does not ascribe to international law in any way, shape, or form in regard to punishments. We will not participate in International Criminal Court. We do not participate in the rulings or judgments. We do not recognize it as a valid institution to take anybody from the United States of America. Actually, we see the ICC as a pretty racist court that goes down and pulls leaders out of second and third world countries and brings them to Europe to charge them. In the case of Venezuela, this is a narco-terrorist state run by a drug kingpin, Nicolas Maduro. Now, regardless of that fact, the United States of America has the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. This is our hemisphere. This is our sphere of influence. And the nonstop flood of drugs and crime that has come out of Venezuela towards the United States after Maduro and the communists took over and destroyed that country. Venezuela was the wealthiest country in all of South America until Maduro took over. Now they are effectively bankrupt. The situation, however, when you look at it, is about protecting American lives, as well as removing Maduro and his narco-terrorist clan from power. And what we're going to do here by closing the airspace, continuing the strikes on the drug boats, and ramping up the pressure domestically is to remove Maduro. Once Maduro is removed, then we're going to probably work with whoever is there and install probably the Nobel Prize winner. This is all coordinated, by the way. It's not by accident that the Venezuelan opposition leader won the Nobel Peace Prize. This is all, behind the scenes. Everybody is working together to eliminate the scourge of Maduro's Venezuela. So not only do we have the right to do it, but we are going to do it because Maduro is eventually going to cave. He's going to take the easy way out. He's going to take the money and he's going to go. Then they're going to balkanize and factionalize inside of Venezuela. So if there was a chance for an invasion, tactically, that would be the time to go. However, that's not going to be what the Trump administration does whatsoever. We are not looking to put anything besides special forces and CIA on the ground. All we're looking to do is do a complete regime change and get Venezuela back into the economic fold to help both the American people and the poor Venezuelan people who have gone through extreme bouts of starvation. A few years ago, the average Venezuelan lost 26 pounds in 1 year. This is a country that is not functional and now needs change, and Donald Trump is going to lead that change with the American empire in the 21st century.
So are you saying that Trump's plan is to oust Nicolas Maduro? That's one. Two, I don't know if you've answered my question with regards the United States having the right to remove or block another country's airspace. Are you saying this is Trump's plan to actually oust Nicolas Maduro?
Absolutely. Trump's stated goal and behind the scenes is 100% to oust Maduro. He is welcome to go with a nice $50 million payment. He can go live in Moscow, wherever he wants, or we can kill him. Those are the two options he has. Most likely, he'll be killed by his own people if he stays around. And on top of it, the right to close airspace, it comes down to might is right. And the fact of the matter is that Venezuela has no air force that's a relevant air force. And anything in the air right now in that area is a threat to the U.S. Navy and our naval carriers. We control that situation. We do not recognize the legitimacy of that government and therefore their right to their airspace. We find it to be illegitimate, and we're going to take that right and control the airspace so we can eventually make it, because very clearly we can kill Maduro at any time. It's just a matter of allowing him not to die so he can do this properly. We can immediately airstrike him and take him out. That's why he's singing Kumbaya and jumping around, trying to be, a big peace guy who killed thousands and thousands of opposition people, locked up dissidents, and sent his terrorist drug dealers to America. So he's going to die or he's going to leave. We have the absolute right to do it, and that is President Trump's stated goal in Venezuela.
I don't know that President Donald Trump has stated outrightly to say he wants to kill Maduro. That's a heavy comment to make, and that's
he's saying that he would remove him or worse.
Yeah, but I mean, when you say kill, a sitting president, I don't know how that's a heavy comment to make, but then, that this could have ripple effect as well. That Venezuela also has positioned, talked to allies, and they're dealing with Russia, and this could have a ripple effect as well. They've, as a matter of fact, going through all of their plans today, it seems like they've also got some Russian equipment. So this could be counter, the offensive could go out of hand. And from the statistics, seems like 80 people have lost their lives as a result of this.
Well, 80 people, 80 narco-terrorists on drug boats have been eliminated by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. In regard to the Russian equipment, I mean, we welcome the situation. Russian equipment has nothing compared to what we can put on the ground. Now, here's the situation with Russia. Russia is completely committed to Ukraine, and we have them bogged down financially and by manpower and equipment. They don't have the equipment to spare because we're destroying their equipment every single day in the Ukraine fight. You saw when Iran reached out to Russia, we need assistance. The Americans have bombed us. You promised assistance. Russia wasn't there. So Russia has sent some ancillary, defensive equipment that we can blow out of the sky with F-35s that nobody will ever see. So Russia does not have the bandwidth. They don't have a functional blue water navy besides a few ships, maybe some nuclear submarine, but not Russia. The last thing they're going to do is get into a prolonged conflict with the Americans in our hemisphere when they can barely control a conflict on their own border. So while it's a nice headline to show that Maduro isn't alone, it actually shows how isolated he is because all he's getting is a few Russian anti-aircraft systems. He's not going to get any ground support, any tactical support, and he's basically left on his own, much like Assad. And what happened to Assad? After the Turks and the Israelis toppled him with the help of the Americans, Assad fled to Moscow because he was smart. And if Maduro is just as smart as Assad, I think he will do the same.
So how do you respond to critics who say, Trump's airspace closure warning is a provocative move to, that could escalate tensions with Venezuela? I mean, you would think that these particular conversations should be behind closed doors. These are sitting presidents. Seems like dialogue is nowhere in the corner. And another question in mind is, is there concrete evidence that Venezuela is actually, dealing into, because several times people have asked the question, is there concrete evidence that Venezuela is involved in large-scale drug trafficking justifying these aggressive measures?
So based on the data from the Department of War and FBI and DIA, absolutely. Tren de Agua, which is the Venezuelan gang that is basically imported to the United States, is one of the largest importers of fentanyl, as well as one of the largest human trafficking organizations in the United States, and mainly for young women to be used in sex slavery along the corridor all the way into the United States. That money is then, of course, repackaged and sent out of the United States illegally. So you have financial crimes, you have human trafficking, and you have drug dealing. These boats that we're blowing up are on exact drug dealing routes. They're not fishing boats. They are not boats that are out there looking for things. They're submersible submarines that we've blown up. This is a known drug trafficking route. We've known this for a long time. This is just the first time that we have decided to act upon it because the U.S. military has been hampered by the fact that these have been considered non-combatants. But with the fact that over 100,000 Americans have died each year from fentanyl and drugs, that's more people that are lost in wars. That's more people that were lost in Korea. That's more people that were lost in Vietnam, combined actually, per year. So we see it as a war on the United States of America, and that's why we think we have the punitive right to defend our country. Now, in regard to escalation, absolutely we're escalating the situation because we don't want Maduro to feel safe at all. If he does not come to heel, we will take the necessary measures that he knows are possible. So we are certainly amping up the situation, building up the rhetoric, and making it very clear that America is here to play ball. And if they're not going to play ball, they're going to get the full force of the U.S. government because the American people are sick and tired of their children, mothers, and friends ending up sick and dead from illegal drugs that have come to this country from this narco state that we have documented State Department evidence that they are supporting.
So I want to draw your attention to when we talk about borders, right? We believe that, you could tighten your borders just to be sure, either by land, either by air, either by sea. Why isn't that option on the table? And how does the administration, we should be talking about mitigating the harm, of civilians dying here, not talking about killing. But how can, the U.S. try to mitigate, Venezuelan civilians who will be affected by the airspace closure and potential military action?
Well, I suppose, there is a very real situation that the Venezuelan people who have been under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress are going to perhaps feel a little bit more. Now, I wouldn't say the average Venezuelan is taking to the skies. So maybe for the wealthy party members who are trying to fly out of the country or something like that, that might affect them. If war comes to their shores, obviously that's a terrible thing. And that's something that, again, President Trump is not a pro-war president. This is very, very much speak softly, but carry a big stick. It's silver or lead. Now, but you have to be able to show the willingness to use the stick, or else the treat isn't respected. So I think that's a situation we have there. And our sympathy is, by the way, is with the Venezuelan people who have been living under the yoke of tyrannical communism that has taken their thriving oil industry and turned it into nothing but a slush fund for basically the enemies of the West. The Venezuelan people are the victims in this situation in some ways just as much as the American families are the victims of these situations. So it's in everybody's interest here for Maduro to go, for Venezuela to get back on the right track. And I think that President Trump is using a position of max pressure and max leverage and mass escalation to acutely pressure Maduro to leave quickly, because we're trying to solve this problem quickly and without any extraordinary bloodshed. And I think that the CIA on the ground can do that.
Right. Now, we're running out of time. Let's talk about congressional approval. When you talk about issues like this, you wonder if it's executive powers that the Trump administration is using. Was Congress, consulted before announcing the airspace closure? And does the administration plan to ask congressional approval for any military action?
So certainly this is a big topic in the United States this century, because the way that the law is written compared to how presidents have acted since 2001 is completely different. Now, the president has the right to send the military into a conflict for up to 90 days without asking for congressional approval, due to the fact that he is the commander in chief and there might be a surprise attack, like a Pearl Harbor, when we need to go. But after 90 days, the president is required to ask for this. Now, what have American presidents done? They've started to, and just as Russia has done, they say this isn't a war, this is a special operation. So this sort of Orwellian double talk that has infiltrated the US system has given both Democrat and Republican congressmen and senators a lot of anger when the other president is using the executive power for this. However, it is in the president's purview in that first 90 days. And if he wants to actually have a full-scale ground invasion or real war, he cannot do that without Congress. Now, he is able to continue doing these airstrikes, dispatching CIA, maybe some special forces, these kind of things in international waters. But as far as a full land invasion, that would be something that would require a full congressional approval. And I don't think that they would give it, by the way, and I don't think that President Trump wants it. It would be cost ineffective, much more effective to remove him, put the correct actors in play, and actually rebuild the Venezuelan economy from the inside out.
So how do you address concerns that this move could damage U.S. relations with other Latin American countries and undermine regional stability?
So I think that other Latin American countries are actually coming around. We see an upswing in elections across Ecuador and upcoming in Honduras, where I've done a lot of business before the communists took over and the whole business environment went down. Now it's going back. You see in El Salvador what Bukele is able to do there, and how he's able to eliminate crime and become an ally of the United States. We see in Brazil, we're dealing with Lula, but we have our Bolsonaro being obviously unfairly imprisoned, somebody who Trump very much cares about. So it's also sending a message to the communists in Brazil that this is, you're welcome to have your own belief systems, you're welcome to have your own form of governments. We're not here to tell you to run your government. But when your government becomes so corrupt that you start impacting, narco-terrorism, which the Brazilians aren't part of, I think Brazil very much would also like to see a reduction in Venezuelan control in the region. So it's in everybody's interest. When you look at Argentina, especially coming with the Trump side, we did a currency swap with them. So America is doubling down, especially with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's a fluent Spanish speaker. That's a hemisphere we want to be involved in. And I think that the region would be much happier to have Russian assets and narco-terrorists eliminated and free commerce and free trade brought back to the hemisphere, which is what I think all along we should have done from the beginning. And America abrogated its responsibility there. And the reason for that is our lack of leadership. So now we need to take back what we failed to do for the last 20 or 30 years.
Now, finally, before you go, which country supports the U.S.'s position of Venezuela, and how are you working to build international coalitions to address the situation? I don't know if you address the issue of land, when you talk about trafficking, land, sea, air, isn't it better to tighten the security in those areas than to go full force or, to escalate the issue that way? That's just the final question. If you can do this in 3 sentences, I would appreciate that.
Yes, land, sea, air, very important. Those waters are critical. However, we want to stop the supply at the source. And that's what we're going to do. In regard to the obvious stress about the situation, I think that the goal here is to trust the president and look at what was possible before Maduro and what we're promising after.
All right. Thank you so much, Morkoc, for joining us from Detroit. We touched on the Venezuela and, of course, the United States crisis there with a senior spokesperson from the Republican Party.